Thank you so much, Shauna, and thanks to the University of Regina for the invitation to talk about one of my very favorite things in the world, teaching with artificial intelligence, teaching first-year writing. I also want to thank Heidi Estrom and the Idaho State Board of Education for generous fellowship funding that's enabled me to pursue some areas of research here. Jason Blomquist, who is my co-AI fellow and a nursing professor at BSU, and my CWI, College of Western Idaho colleagues, Joel Glad and Gigi Smith, for excellent conversations and also for reviewing this presentation. Both of them teach first year writing. Gigi is our writing center director. And also thanks to all of you who are taking time out of your busy schedule today. I know we've all got a lot going on. For many of us, as we're beginning the term, I wanted to add too, I'm coming to you from the Shoshone and Paiute and Bannock ancestral homelands in beautiful Boise, Idaho. So I'm really grateful that I get to live and work here. But for many of us, we're starting a semester where we really have to face the reality that our students are using generative artificial intelligence. So I personally, when I attend these webinars, love interactive chats. I love to learn from you. And I checked in with Shauna, and she says that we can, in fact, save and share the chat. So at certain points in the presentation today, I might ask you to contribute some things. If you want to introduce yourself right now while we're getting warmed up, that would be great. Just tell us who you are, what your role is, and where you're from. But we will save the chat. And I love to see those conversations happen because I know at this point, we're probably all in slightly different places. I will tell you right up front, I am a true cyborg writer at this point in my life. This is my 5th semester where I will be teaching with generative AI in my first year writing classrooms. And in fall of 2024, I taught for the first time classes where AI was integrated into every aspect of the writing process. Now, it is an active area of research for me. And so I have to stress, and I told my students this as well, we are all learning together right now, and there is a very real risk of harm. So when we start thinking about ethics, we have to start from that place. I love when people on LinkedIn call themselves AI experts. I have no idea how anyone is an AI expert at this point. It seems like I close my eyes or look away for 2 minutes and there's 15 new things that have come out. So we'll address some of those ethical issues. I'm also going to share exactly what I do in those writing classrooms and hopefully give you some resources and ideas. But as I mentioned, I would love to learn from you as well. I come from a background in the humanities, and I will be sharing perspective not only as a teacher, but also as a learner. I just started a PhD program in English and the teaching of English at Idaho State University, where I am sure I am a bane to my professors who would just prefer to think that artificial intelligence doesn't exist. So with that, let's get going. I think when we discuss the importance of ethics in higher education, we have to start, and I'm starting with you, where I start with my students. I was very grateful to Donna Phipps and Lori Landclose, who very early in the AI timeline provided at their blog, Digital is People, this AI acknowledgement statement. I found this very early on, and I've used it to teach because I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there are several ethical concerns about AI. There just are. So I want to make sure that we start with that grounding of ethics. And this is where I let you know that this presentation was prepared using several AI chatbots, including ChatGPT. I used Google Gemini, and then my favorite bot friend, I call him my bot friend, Claude.ai. I acknowledge that AI chatbots do not respect the individual rights of authors and artists and ignore concerns over copyright and intellectual property in the training of the system. Additionally, I acknowledge that the system was trained in part through the exploitation of precarious workers in the global South. In this work, I specifically used AI tools to review content, provide images, and create some of the content that I demonstrate. So when I teach with AI, I always start with this AI acknowledgement statement because I want to make sure that my students are approaching these tools skeptically and cautiously. And for me, at least, that's very, very important to keep in mind. So if you take one thing from the presentation today, if you weren't familiar with this acknowledgement statement, you'll have it in the link to the presentation, and it might be something you consider using in your own work. So today, these are some things that I'm hoping we can cover. I'm kind of taking a page out of Ethan Mollick's presentation style. I probably talk really fast. My students tell me that all the time. I have a lot of ground I want to cover, and I'm also hoping to get some input from some of you. So it will be kind of fast. I apologize, but I'm hoping that we can get through these 4 learning objectives. First, that we'll consider those ethical considerations, but also how they intersect with our personal values. I think that's a really important conversation to have, and I do not think there's a right answer, right? We'll hear plenty of things, but I don't think there's a right answer to this, and I think the conversation itself is very important. Secondly, I hope that we can appreciate the benefits and risks of using AI writing tools in the classroom. And then third, that we can maybe identify some practical strategies. So if you're here today to get some practical strategies, I hope you'll leave with some, and also some open education resources that feel free to use. I do license all of my own prompts as Creative Commons 0, which means no attribution is required. Have fun with them, modify them, do whatever you want with them. And then finally, we'll think about how we can design writing assessments that are authentic in the age of AI. And thank you for all of you who are introducing yourselves. Oh, hi, Lee. I see a colleague from Boise State University. Good to see you. A bunch of you. Thanks for being here. All right. So, and also this AI art. We could probably spend a whole presentation talking about AI art. I asked ChatGPT to read this slide and create an image, and I hate it. I hate this slide, or that picture. It's just, ugh, right? This is another thing I'll often do to introduce AI to my students. I will share something like weird AI art or something like this timeline. So this is a tool like many ed tech tools that we're seeing in higher education. This is from a tool called infographics. And oh, sorry, thank you. Yeah, there we go. Got through learning. I need to remember to move my slides. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Melanie. Oh, hey, Melanie. Good to see you here. Melanie is one of my heroes. I used some of her open education resources for one of my own projects. She's amazing. But anyway, so this is created by a tool called infographics, and it's like many of these tools, it's freemium. So it could be fun to work with. You can try it out. Your students can use it. But I just asked it very simply to create a timeline of how AI has been used in higher education starting in November 2022 with the introduction of ChatGPT 3.5, which that's one of those moments for me that I will probably always remember. That first chat, I happened to be the department chair of our philosophy program at the time. I'm a classicist by background, so kind of, original gangster humanities. And I put our signature assignment into ChatGPT 3.5, and it wrote me a lovely essay about comparing utilitarianism and Kant's deontology with respect to eating meat. And I went, oh, okay, yeah, some things are about to change for me, for my colleagues, for all of us. So that was November 2022. I asked infographics to create this lovely timeline. And I'll show students things like this, or I'll have them try tools like this, because I think we can all agree this looks really good. It looks good, right? It's got great form. It's attractive. It's got information. The information reads well. But as we often find with AI tools, if we dig into the content, we might start to have some question marks, right? So I'm looking at 2024, which is where we are now, and I'm saying, oh, really? Really? That's what I want to ask you. And if maybe you guys could consider putting this in the chat, I'd love you to think of 3 words for where you are with AI today. This is where infographics AI thinks we are. By the end of 2024, AI tools, agents, and reasoning models were widely adopted in higher education institutions. They played a crucial role in enhancing the quality of education, providing personalized learning experiences. We hear that personalized learning experiences a lot, and supporting administrative tasks. All right, so that's where AI thinks we are. Where are we actually? Maybe thinking of 3 words that come to mind. And if you could share those in the chat, I might try something out. Ooh, cautiously excited and humbled. Let me grab that one. Okay, I'm gonna escape this really quick and show you what I'm doing. So I'll do this sometimes with my students. So it's just a fun word cloud generator, and I'm just copying your, I love we have panicked. Oops, I don't want Denise. I'm not doing this great. So sorry, you guys. Curious and a bit overwhelmed. That is something I can totally understand. I love seeing skeptical. And I love if we look through the comments, we can see that there's a wide range of experience here, right? Like some of us are still AI curious, some of us are feeling really like what is going on. Some of us are experts, some of us are like me and we're already cyborgs. So you can run an experiment like this with your students and you can check in. Hey Gigi, thanks for being here. Not impressed. That's great. Yeah. Only initially impressed, Jackson. That's kind of like what I was getting at with this demonstration, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and do these now, and we'll show. So you could do an exercise like this with your students and visualize it. And this is just at word art. Maybe some of you have done this one before. Let's see. I don't know. Has anyone done this one before? So here it goes. Whoa. Hey, look what the top word is. Curious. Curious. That makes me happy because that is my own top word for AI. And I think when we consider these tools from a place of curiosity, that can be really beneficial. So thank you for sharing that. And remember, again, we'll have the chat and I might even update it. I'm not sure I grabbed everybody's responses, but you can try an activity like that with your students in class just to kind of get a feel for where they are, right? Just like us, your students are going to have varying levels of expertise, but I will tell you again, since this is now, I'm going into my 5th semester. When I started teaching with AI in spring of 2023, I would say maybe 3 out of a class of 20 of my students even knew what ChatGPT was. By the time I taught that fully integrated class, 100% of my students had tried some kind of AI tool. And if you're open to it and you tell them they won't get in trouble, they're going to tell you a lot of things. Like I heard a lot about how they were used for senior projects and how proud the students were that they got away with it. So it's definitely here. Your students are using it. And sometimes, as we probably noticed, they're using it badly, right? So here comes my controversial statement about writing in AI. I feel like one of the challenges for all of us, and I didn't really see this, I saw alarmed or a few things like that in the chat, but I didn't really see anyone talk about loss and grief. And I'm wondering if we could sit with that idea for a minute, because for me personally, in that moment in November 2022, when I had ChatGPT write an essay, I experienced a sense of grief. And um, Jonathan, Jonathan Poritz for the win. Why wouldn't people, students, faculty use plagiarism as a service? Yeah. Or even as Matthew Kirschenbaum and Rita Rayleigh have said, it's a university as a service, right? We're certainly seeing that push. But for me, my initial response honestly was wonder and awe. And then my second response was grief and loss, and maybe even a little fear. And what I've tried to shift to is back to that word cloud. I want to be curious about AI. I loved what Avril wrote, cautious and curious. I think this is a good approach, right? So we have to keep in mind that things are moving very, very fast with these tools. And I think it's fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any of us on this particular webinar asked for a tool whose really perhaps most safe and best use case is to write a college essay. I don't know. I didn't ask for that. I've been a writing teacher for a long time, and I definitely did not ask for a tool that could write a college essay. And when I say perhaps one of the best use cases, because of the error rates and the hallucinations, we know that these tools have some challenges. Like my co-fellow Jason Blomquist uses them in healthcare. And he's also very skeptical and very cautious because of the hallucination rates, right? That's a real stakes, real world stakes sort of scenario. But in college, the worst case is you're just going to have a bunch of crappy essays and students aren't going to learn how to think critically, right? So I understand if you're not with me on this statement. I really do. But for me, this is where I am. And this is where I'm teaching writing with the belief that the college essay is dead, but human writing is not. And it's frankly where my own writing is. Like I mentioned at the top of the presentation, I am largely a cyborg writer at this point. So, what I mean by cyborg, I'm borrowing that term from Ethan Mollick's book, Co-Intelligence, which is an excellent book. If you haven't read it, it's very short. Our college did a college read on it for faculty. It was really informative. But Mollick talks about two types of peoples who have approaches to AI. He talks about cyborgs. That's what I am. These are people who will try AI for anything, and they've integrated it into their daily process. That's definitely me. There are centaurs. These are people who identify appropriate use cases for AI and maybe use AI for some things, but then other things are strictly human domain. I find that a lot with my creative writing students, for example, where they feel very protective of their creative writing and don't want to use AI in that space, but they might use it in another space, like to help draft an email to a professor. So these ideas of centaur and cyborg, I think, are helpful again when you're thinking about how students might be interacting. But I want to call out and thank my colleague Joel Glad, who also has called this out. I call out a third category, which is resistor. Jonathan Poritz, that's you, right? And I do feel like this is an incredibly important role in the conversations that we're having right now. A resistor is just that, right? Like someone who does not want to use AI. And so, as we think about ethical uses of AI, for some of you and for some of your students, there might not be any. And that is an important conversation. I think we need to acknowledge that reality that we are not in agreement and that this really has shaken things up for us. But now that we've acknowledged it, I'm going to just move on, dive in, and continue to show you some things that I'm doing in the classroom and with my own writing. So I have argued the college essay is dead. I am a classicist. So it's such a weird thing the way this Google AI search has popped up in our lives now, right? Like again, no one asked for that, and a lot of times it's wrong. So I love this. I asked it about, people used to think that once we stopped teaching Latin in schools, everything would be destroyed. No one would be able to critically think. No one would be able to come up with good ideas anymore. Those of you who know about the history of higher ed was classics. It was Latin and Greek for a long time. So I asked Google about that, and it came up with this lovely quote in quotation marks. Without the discipline of Latin grammar, the mind would become as unmoored as a ship without an anchor, drifting aimlessly without the ability to truly reason and analyze. That's a completely made up quote. You see from my screenshots, right? I kind of showed you what it came up with. I was like, but it sure sounds like something Churchill would have said. So sure. This is like another thing you can show students and you can demonstrate this again to build skepticism right up front. Show them something and then have them try something they know. I got this idea from the YouTuber Marcus Brownlee, who said, if you want to see how AI works, ask it some questions about something you're an expert in. So I tell my students, what's your favorite video game? What's your favorite anime? Like start chatting with whatever chat tool you're going to use about that very specific area that you have expert knowledge in. And they can see pretty quickly that AI, again, back to the idea of form over content, sometimes AI can produce the form of something without necessarily providing accurate or even interesting content, right? So when we work with AI and when we tell students about how to work with AI, doing these types of exercises up front, you're getting buy-in from them that their ideas still matter. I think one of the saddest conversations I had from a student with, I'll approach my students individually if I think they're using AI inappropriately. The student told me, I asked, well, why did you do this? And she said, well, because AI is smarter than me. I just thought AI is not thinking. This is a stochastic parrot, to quote Emily Bender and company, right? I said, no, AI is not smarter than you. AI cannot replace you. And this is something we're all concerned about, right? So when we think about these things, it's important to know that students are thinking about them too. But that's just an example. So what comes next then? If the college essay is dead, that's the space I'm playing around in. I don't have answers for you. Some of you may have some ideas. Please, again, feel free to share them. I love to learn from chats and these sorts of things. But I do know this. I do know that the humanities are essential to whatever comes next. I don't necessarily know how. I don't necessarily know what that will look like, but this is the space I'm playing in. And again, with complete respect, if your personal values make it so that you need to be a resistor, I have complete respect for that. But if you do feel like you might be able to explore or to put your fingers onto keys, our students want guidance from us. This is here. It's not going away. And frankly, blanket bans of AI are not going to work. That is not the way that we're going to be able to effectively address these new technologies in the classroom. So there are no right answers, but my personal belief is that writing instructors and humanities instructors need fingers on keys at this point in the evolution of these tools. Also, I know early on, I had a lot of colleagues who thought it wasn't a big deal because they thought Turnitin was going to come in and save the day, right? We were going to have plagiarism detectors. I think probably most of you on this webinar today realize there are no reliable detectors. There will not be reliable detectors. That's not the way generative AI works. So when we take detectors out of the picture, when we acknowledge that any free chatbot at this point can write a C-level, sometimes even better if prompted correctly, college essay, we need to really think about what we're teaching, why we're teaching it, and how we can make sure that we keep providing that important education of bringing out human intelligence and human thought processes and human learning when it's really easy to outsource it to AI, right? So keep in mind that if you're approaching these tools from a mindset that all students want to cheat, I don't think that's, again, this is me. I don't think it's the right mindset. I don't think all students want to cheat. I think students still want to learn. So we need to set up an environment where students can feel guided and supported, and they can feel free to be curious, like many of us are, and to make mistakes, and then have a chance to redo some things. So that's a position that I'm taking and what I'm arguing. We don't know the answers yet, but for those of us, especially in writing instruction and in the humanities, like Christina said, we need to focus on the process and we need to understand that writing is just one way to convey knowledge. Yeah, traditionally, it's been highly valued, but at this point, we need to be thinking about how we can keep asking students to do that important work of thinking. So again, I know we're all worried about various things. And I'm sharing my own position because I other people disagree with me, and I think those disagreements are valid. I think we're in conversation right now, to be super clear. So what I'm sharing is my own personal feelings about ethical issues with AI. So I see a lot of people concerned about plagiarism, and I mentioned that in the AI acknowledgement statement that I gave. But for me personally, I don't care. I've been in open education a long time. I will admit that when I found out that my book, The Price of Silence, had been stolen by the Books3 dataset, I did feel a little jolt for a minute, but then I asked myself, do I actually care about this? And the answer was no, I don't care. People can have it, train AI on it, whatever. That's me. I have what Sarah Eaton has called a post-plagiarist mindset. And again, I don't expect that everyone does, right? There's an essential tension about authorship, and credit does remain important. Creative Commons, for example, really emphasizes the importance of credit with even its most basic CC BY license, right? So we really want to keep in mind how we feel about plagiarism, but for me, this just is not an issue. I'm not even concerned about it. And I tell my students that too, and I give them the option, right? So the second thing I'm not the least bit concerned about, because I started playing around with these LLMs really early on, started figuring out how they were working. I'm not concerned about student cheating. It's just never really been concerned about student cheating, to be honest, and nothing's changed. I refuse to be the AI police in my classroom. That does not bring me any joy. Right? It's not why I'm in this profession. I am here to help students learn, and I'm here to help students share their unique, great ideas with the world. And what I realized pretty early on was that these tools can actually help a lot of students, right? So instead of even thinking about detectors, I realized early on that I wanted to allow AI. I wanted to allow it. Now, at first, I allowed limited uses, and I'll share a syllabus training that I created that gives a lot of different options. But at this point, I allow any and all use of generative AI, but students have to show me what they're doing. And I do mean they have to show me their chats. They've got to show me their prompts. I want to see all of it. It does take a little bit more work on my part to see this stuff, right? But what I found is that generally students are happy to show me what they're doing. And it's someone had mentioned process before, right? Like it's become part of our process. So when you allow and you teach with AI, students will show you what they're doing with it. I do reserve the right in my syllabus, if I feel like they're using it in a way that harms them, to ask them to redo the assignment. And I have asked some students to redo assignments. It's fine, right? Like we feel safe to play around and explore. But I know the third point, losing my job, I have an asterisk next to that because, okay, wait, who is on this call? Okay, are there administrators on this call? We all know like faculty are just such a bunch of trouble, right? And we just cost so much money. And wouldn't it be great if we could have personalized learning? I'm thinking about Leon Furs here, who you should follow if you don't. He has just great stuff and some really great takes on personalized learning and AI. But yeah, won't it be better to have personalized learning with AI tutors than these cranky faculty? Long story short, no. And I'm actually not concerned about losing my job, even though we do have this amazing CTL expert at our college who he's amazing. But at every single AI committee meeting, he tells us we're all going to be out of jobs in 5 years or less. And I'm like, chill, chill. We're not. We're going to rethink what our roles look like. I think that as we integrate the tools and we also study, so this is a new research area, we study how they're impacting learning, we're actually creating a more robust learning environment for higher ed in general. And I also think back to all the other things that were going to kill our jobs, right? Like, was it MOOCs? Was that just like 10 years ago, right? Like the massive online courses, we were all going to be out of a job then, right? So we're still here. And I do think we still bring value. So these are not things I'm worried about. If you're worried about it, though, I do respect that position. Now, this is what I am worried about, and I'd love for you to share what you're worried about too. I'm really, really curious about what we're worried about. So I'm terrified about the hallucinations in our post-truth society. We were already headed down this road anyway, and now we can't trust what we see, we can't trust what we hear. Um, it's a strange world that we're living in, right? So hallucinations, that's for those of you who aren't, I think probably everyone knows that term, but just in case you don't, this is just the fact that generative AI, large language models, generate stuff. They make stuff up and they have gotten better, it's true. But again, back to that exercise you could do with your students. If you're an expert on something, you're going to catch some mistakes, right? And that brings me to my second point. I personally realized pretty early on, especially in interacting with students and see what they were turning in with using like ChatGPT or Copilot. We use a lot of Copilot at our school. I found that they were really bad at it. I seem to just intuitively be able to partner and become that cyborg writer with AI, but I realize that's because I'm an expert. I'm an expert writer. I've been writing and teaching writing for so many years, right? I think I was like a generation one mommy blogger. So hey, LLMs were probably trained on my stuff, right? Um, so who's going to train the experts if we lose this pipeline and this process, right? Um, I think this is really, really important to consider because we're seeing the same thing in computer science, right? Where expert coders can now be much more productive and accomplish much more work, but you still need that expert check on the tools. Um, it scares me. That's something that keeps me up at night, right? Like who's going to train the experts if we have these AI interns and we don't need people to do those jobs. I'm very concerned by the black box nature of LLMs, and especially the pressure to use LLMs for assessment and data analysis. I could do a whole separate presentation on that. I've done some deep dives with trying to get these tools to do data analysis. And just like that first slide I showed you from infographics, it produces pretty stuff that looks right. And it's not. It's not right. We were trying to even just get it to stick to an assessment rubric once, and that took pseudocode in order to get. I was trying to create a custom GPT to assess student artifacts, and someone on my team asked me. They were like, "Well, like for one of the batches we ran, it gave them all fours. Great. And what someone on my team was like, well, ask it why I gave them all fours. And I just started to laugh. I was like, it's just making this stuff up, right? So I am concerned about this. At the same time, I'm actively testing out ways that I can use them for research. And I am finding definitely some benefits right now, especially in the research I'm running on the class I taught in the fall with qualitative analysis, but it's not replacing me as a researcher, right? So again, you've got to make sure you're the human in the loop, as Ethan Mollick says. Um, we are hearing a lot right now on social media about climate impacts. I was joking with Shauna at the beginning. I got access to Sora this week. That was really a bad thing because like I lost a lot of time and probably used a swimming pool worth of water to create some really bad, stupid videos. But climate impacts, it was interesting to me. Early on, when I was first playing with these tools, I had just read Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry for the Future, which is a great book if you haven't read it. And I also knew a little bit about NFTs and Bitcoin. And so when I saw these tools and how they were functioning, I immediately got suspicious about their energy use. Did some digging. I think I was one of the first people to really ask this question. So I wrote in June 2023, I wrote an essay that I assigned to my students called Surviving the Text Apocalypse. They like it. And I'm taking that term from Matthew Kirschenbaum, the text apocalypse, and which still is something I'm a little worried about. But I asked ChatGPT then about it. I thought, why not, right? And it said, don't worry, AI will solve climate change. I was like, oh, that's very self-serving. Great, AI. So glad to know you're going to solve it. And I just laughed. But you know what? Actually, like, I think AI is right. I think we're gonna see some interesting things. Quick aside for my board game geeks out there, I love the German board game Power Grid, and I'll freely admit that my usually winning strategy is to build capacity and capital with dirty coal and go nuclear as quickly as possible, and that's what we're seeing because of the power needs of AI. So I do think the renewed focus on nuclear power might mitigate some of the climate change risks. And I think that again, because it's generative, it helps us come up with like lots of new ideas, things that we didn't even really necessarily think of. So in that respect, I think it's kind of interesting. Um, so climate impacts are an asterisk for me. I was super concerned. That was my top concern at the beginning. I'm less concerned 2 years in. Privacy and consent continue to be huge concerns for me. And it's something I think we all need to think about in higher ed. I don't know what Canada has, but in the United States, we have FERPA, right, that many of us are familiar with. And so it's important for us to keep that in mind. Stress that with your students as well. I said the college essay was dead. If you teach fully online courses, I think the online discussion is dead too. I've just noticed so many of my students copying and pasting their classmates' stuff without even thinking about the fact that they're stealing their classmates' intellectual property and that they are violating their privacy. So addressing those concerns with your students right up front, that's for me the one unacceptable use of AI in my classrooms. I say you cannot copy and paste anybody's work without explicit consent, right? I just feel like that's really important. Because our students aren't necessarily consenting just by taking our class to have their work used in training AI tools, right? I shared in the folder that I'll share at the end where I have a bunch of resources from this presentation. Dr. Tori Trust has a fantastic presentation on privacy and user agreements that I turn to. It's a really great resource on this issue. It's very comprehensive and long, but you can pull specific parts of it out for students. And then finally, change fatigue, burnout. And I'm just checking to see if any of this resonates with you guys. I'd asked you, what are you most worried about? Oh, I'm glad to hear. Yeah. I'm glad to hear some of us aren't worried. Yeah, but like the erosion of writing skills, all of that stuff, this is really good. I already feel the burnout. Yeah, so Sarah, like, and all of you, it's just a lot. I'm a person of a certain age, so I do actually remember card catalogs. Those of you who remember those things, I remember l'année philologique, having to look things up in a print bibliography to do research. I remember the move to the internet when I was a graduate student at UCLA. I think we all went on strike because they were asking us to do one online office hour a week, one online office hour, if you can imagine. And like so much has changed in our lifetimes, right? It's been a lot. This change has been really, really fast. And again, I think even just the month of December, I was like, what is going on here? So feel free to give yourself breaks, and we'll talk about some strategies to mitigate that. But first, I want to switch specifically to what I'm doing in my classroom. So I'm going to talk to you as a teacher first, and then share a little bit as how I've interacted with these tools as a learner. And again, my the book that I'm using for the class is an open education resource. It's candidly a hot mess right now. I'm one of those people who builds airplanes while I fly them. So I'm always open to feedback. If you catch typos, I tell my students the same thing. You find a typo, I'll give you extra credit. But it's very much a work in progress. And so please take that with a grain of salt. It may be more or less useful to you. But when I've already modeled to you a lot of what I do in my classroom, right? Like, so starting with examples, getting students' attitudes and concerns and how they feel about AI out there, all of that right up front. But I think also we're already really good at this, starting with that assumption that your students are there to learn. Right. Again, it's just been really strange to me to see the focus on cheating, cheating, cheating. I'm like, why? I had one faculty member who said, well, what do you do when you know a student has turned in a completely AI generated paper? And I paused for a minute and I said, well, what did you do when a student turned in a paper that they bought from a paper mill? Like, because I handle it the same way, right? Like, let's meet. Talk to me. Tell me what you know about this. I want to hear your voice. Oh, and somebody just mentioned that, Tony, the loss of voice. Yeah, I think I'm seeing it like you are, Tony, like that it's actually an opportunity for us to discover voice. Like I think for a long time in writing, we trained our students to write like robots. And now that robots can do that writing, we can go back. Okay, maybe I'm sounding like Peter Elbow, but we can go back to expressivist writing. And I'll share a little bit. I do encourage students to do that, to bring the human back into the writing, right? But start with that assumption that students are here to learn. That's why they're here. And if you give them that goodwill, they're going to work with you. They'll give you the goodwill right back. When students cheat, when they use AI to cheat, they're doing it for the same reasons they've always cheated. They're overwhelmed. Yeah, I teach at an open access community college. Maybe they're afraid, they don't understand, they're time crunched. The same reasons students have always cheated are still there with AI. It's just maybe a little quicker, right? Do establish that skepticism up front. I hope I modeled that for you all. Introduce and acknowledge those ethical concerns. Then get that student buy-in for the value of human writing, right? Like that's the hard part. Like if we don't have that buy-in, of course ChatGPT can write an essay. So one way you can do that, and I know some of you are just so amazing at this already, is to create interesting writing assignments, right? Or to give students, my students say this, they love this, having more control over their own topics. It's a little harder sometimes up front. Yeah, so Melanie, exactly, like giving them chance to use their own. You were someone I was thinking of, Melanie, who uses like interesting writing assignments, right? Like, hey, students will want to write when they're interested in it. And getting their input in that, like treating them, we don't have to be, again, the AI experts here, and being that way with your students, saying, I'm not the AI expert here, we're all learning, we're curious. Get their feedback, get their buy-in. In my classes, I encourage any AI use at all, up to and including writing an entire paper. And on day one, and you'll have access to this paper link, but I hand them a paper that AI wrote. And at the end of it, it says, I acknowledge the use of Microsoft Copilot to write this entire paper. Here are my chats. And it's not just one chat. That's something that's kind of an aha moment for students. They're like, oh, I can't just write a complex paper just with one prompt. I have to keep iterating. I have to keep prompting. And then we grade it on my rubric, and the students are surprised that this AI generated paper that really, realistically, I think it took me around 45 minutes. to use AI to write it. It earns a C on my rubric. So, think about your rubric and how you grade stuff, and then have students practice that, have them try it, right? Teach prompting as a skill. This is something that I definitely noticed right away, and I continue to notice it in my classes, that not all students know how to prompt. A lot of them don't, right? And many of them, I've heard this even now, I hear it a lot. Well, yeah, I tried AI once, but it didn't give me anything useful, so I haven't used it for anything else. I bet there's a few of us on this call who feel that way, right? Like we tried it once, we're like, oh, that's crap, I'm not using it again. Prompting is a skill, interacting is a skill. So I think that is like a really important thing to keep in mind. And again, if they're showing you their interactions, you'll be able to give them feedback on their prompting as well. Uh, Create an environment where revision is expected. This has been really important to my success in teaching with AI, where students understand that their first draft is not going to be the final draft. And in fact, I've asked them to do harder things because I tell them, we've got this AI assistance now. So we're going to do more complicated papers, longer papers. We're going to interact with sources, higher quality sources, because we have this assistant, right? They're up for it. They're up for the challenge. So keep that challenge. Yeah, I'm going to talk about friction in just a minute as a learner. So thank you for mentioning friction in the chat. Yeah, exactly. And they want to experience friction. That's how they learn. And then model this for them. Model how to always be the human in the loop. That's from Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence book. And then finally, like, it's so important to stay curious and flexible. I can't stress enough, if you can bring that attitude of curiosity to these tools instead of really a fixed mindset. We talk a lot about mindsets we want our students to have. We need to have that learning mindset too right now. And that can feel a little vulnerable sometimes, right? Especially if we've traditionally been the expert in our class. And I'll freely admit it. I've taught classes as the expert, and I'm not anymore. I'm not an expert. It's humbling, but I think in a good way. So if you're open to that, I think that can be really important. Um, Charisma noted that not all students can afford full access to many AI writing programs, and this is really, really important. So Charisma, I consider it in my course, and so I'll show you what I do with that specifically. I'm lucky I have a grant with this, and I want to upfront acknowledge that I'm going to talk about a tool that I absolutely love called My Essay Feedback. I am not paid by My Essay Feedback, but I have done some consulting with them just to kind of help improve the tool. Anna Mills, who many of you know, she's one of my heroes. Anna introduced me to this tool and connected me with the developer, Eric Keene, who's also one of my heroes now. And it's just been a wonderful tool for my students to use. It doesn't, I think there is a cost associated with it now, but it's like a course fee, Charisma, if you consider using it. So those of you who've used something like Eli Review, it's similar, and the pricing model is really inexpensive. I'm always about low cost, but I've been fortunate to be able to fund this with grants from my institution for my students so far. So it's no cost. We don't have textbook costs for this class right now. This is the textbook I mentioned. It's the hot mess, Cyborgs and Centaurs. If the cover makes you laugh, it makes me laugh too. The whole first chapter is called What's Wrong with This Picture? And it, again, uses this horrible image generation experience I had where no matter what I did, I could not get the AI to acknowledge that centaurs don't have horns. I would circle it and say, don't put a horn. And then it would say, well, here's your image without a horn. And there's the horn. I'd say, stop gaslighting me, ChatGPT, right? So anyway, I think it's a good way to introduce it. It's just the goofiest picture in the world. And it kind of, the chapter kind of captures what that experience can be like and how prompting is a skill and can be difficult, right? So the paper I mentioned, that can be really fun for you guys, this sample APA paper. I'll click on it really quick so we can see it. So I did this right after going to see the solar eclipse back in Indiana. And this is completely, so I hand this to my students on day one. It's completely AI generated, including, just so you know, I think my favorite part is the reflection part. Like, isn't that great, right? nothing short of stepping through a portal into another realm. Oh, I just get chills, right? It's talking all about its personal reflection of observing the solar eclipse. Totally made up. So don't depend on reflection is my lesson there, right? Like reflective writing, AI can do it. It gave me the references. I used Microsoft Copilot for this. And then there's that AI acknowledgement statement, and there's a link to all of my prompts. So students get to see this and they get to see what I expect from them for any and all use of AI. I expect at the end of the paper that they're going to have this statement and they're going to share all their prompts with me. So I'll know exactly what they're doing. I feel like that kind of sets the stage for students. And then the book, Cyborgs and Centaurs, they've enjoyed it. They've reported that it's interesting and kind of fun. There are a lot of prompting exercises in there that they try for each of the steps of the writing process. My readings, which I feel free to email me if you want. I don't think I have a list of the readings for you guys here, but if you want them, I'll send them. But I try to stay very current. So we have subscriptions to New York Times. I look for stuff that's really current. And we look at AI ethics, workplace issues, those types of things. So all of the readings are designed to build skepticism, think about the concerns they might have, all of that, right? And then for my essay feedback, this is the tool that I use. I love this tool. I know some of us candidly have been like, wouldn't it be great if it could grade for me? And it's not very good at grading. Spoiler alert. But if you use this tool, My Essay Feedback, it is LTI integrated. So it pops right into your LMS. You can see all of your student chats and their interactions. It's really interesting to me. Like I had one student who turned in something late and he was apologizing to the AI and the AI was like, that's okay. It's great that you even attempted. And then like gave him all these time management tips, which was really fun, like kind of unsolicited. So that was cute. I really love this tool. It's very simple. It doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. Students we continue to do kind of a chunked writing process. They submit their writing. They learn to create rubrics for the AI to use. So that's kind of how they learn to prompt. And you can create your own prompts or you can use, like I started using Anna's when I first started using the tool because Anna Mills has so many great things there. But this is a really fun tool. And those formative tasks auto grade and students can do peer review within the platform as well. So I've really liked this tool for my class. It's really helped me to see what my students are doing. I can provide feedback and I do provide feedback. My favorite piece of it, I think this was probably Anna's idea, is that students, in order to earn their grade, have to reflect on the AI feedback. And we found that about 95% of the time it's pretty good, but 5% of the time it goes off the rails. And so those students have a great time. They know I expect them to be really harsh on that feedback and evaluate it really, really, really critically. So where do we continue to teach critical thinking? Well, through that evaluation of the AI tool, students really like it. They tell me it kind of feels like it's gaming it. It's making it like a game for them a little bit. And they like catching the AI or evaluating the AI. So I think that'll help them for the workplace too. When we think about that concern I had about preparing people to be experts, right? They'll have that level of interaction that they'll understand what these tools can and can't do. My essay feedback uses an API call to ChatGPT 4 Open. So you could theoretically do the same thing if students had 4 Open. But what I like about this tool is it's LMS integrated. So it's right in it's right there. I can use it. And the grades auto-populate based on criteria. So for formative assessment, it's fantastic. We also did a lot with image generation. That's really fun. They do a visual argument PSA where they do image generation, but do be careful. Sometimes you can get some really random things with NSFW images. Be careful about that if you teach with image generation. And then just to share really quickly, I'm going to have to talk fast too because I could go on all day and I want to make sure I share my learning experience too. One of the most memorable class activities I did with this class was is it cheating? So I had them, we were about 2/3 of the way through the semester working on persuasive argument, and I had them create their first full prompt, considering audience, purpose, tone, argument style. Were they doing Tolman? Were they doing Rogerian? Were they doing classical Aristotelian? They had to like incorporate all of that stuff, write a prompt, and get the AI to produce a paragraph that they could and that I expected them to use in their persuasive argument essay. So, and I said, I'm only going to give you 10 minutes. You got 10 minutes to write that prompt, and then you need to have that paragraph. So, silence in the classroom. We worked on it. We finished. Time was up. I said, okay, did I just ask you to cheat? And the students were like, what? It's like, no, did I? Did I ask you to cheat? How many of you think I just asked you to cheat? And I see about a third of their hands kind of up in the air. They're like, yeah. And I was like, how many of you think that wasn't cheating at all? Third of the hands shot confidently up in the air. And then I said, okay, let me tell you where I am. I'm not sure whether I asked you to cheat or not. How many of you feel that way? That was the last third, right? Like, I don't know. Did you ask me to cheat? I don't know either. I don't know if I asked them to cheat. But what we talked about, we had a really robust discussion, is that if you feel like you're cheating, you probably are. Right. Now, my students who didn't feel like they were cheating at all shared their prompts, and I agree with them. They had really robust prompts, and I had a few people who just even had never used AI before, and they took to it. They just intuitively understood what to do, and prompting became part of their process, like it is for me. So those cyborg writers, I think some people are just going to be more natural at that than others. But I agreed with them. I said, if you don't feel like you cheated, that prompt is a paragraph. My goodness, right? So keep in mind, prompting's writing, right? So again, you can dig into that book. Let me know. Here's some comments from students, and you can read them on your own time. But I really, these are from I'm using this all. This is an IRB research approved study, so I'll be digging into this. Hopefully, presenting on it, maybe publishing later. So let's see, Jonathan. Sociopaths never cheat. I'm sure they do. Whatever. Like it's not my problem, right? I don't feel like I as a teacher need to hone in on that, right? So they were, these are some things that they said. Human in the loop came out. AI is more of a tool than a catch-all. It made sure my writing was clear and understandable. Obviously, AI should not be used to write papers for you. So I mean, these are end of course reflections. This is what you're seeing students say at the end of course. So I had 2 fall sections, 34 students, 26 agreed to let me look at all of their interactions. Out of all of those students in 2 sections, I would say, well, no, I know this. Only 3 used AI in ways that I thought was unethical and harmed their learning. All 3 met with me, revised, and worked on their papers in front of me, right? So we could make sure they were using it in ethical ways. So only 3 that I really felt like didn't get what we were doing. And I feel like, again, embracing it was good. I'm going to kind of zoom past this just so I can show you as a learner really quick. And then I know time is valuable, but these are just some things that I think someone had mentioned friction earlier. There can be no frictionless learning. So absolutely keeping friction top of mind, I think, is really, really critical, right? Someone had mentioned that earlier, and I just want to stress that's important. All right, so now AI as a learner. Boy, has that been eye-opening. I had 2 classes last semester. Professor 1, that's his syllabus policy, no AI. And he said on the first day, you're a graduate student in English. Why would you ever use AI? And I was like, oh, uh-oh. Well, we all say we can catch students, right? So he said no AI. I like typed out my MLA citations by hand. I didn't want to use any AI for any reason. Like I was like old school as I could get, right? And so this was a difficult assignment because you had to like basically summarize Judith Butler's Gender Trouble in like 2.5 pages, which is pretty hard. I spent a lot of time on this paper. I love Gender Trouble. It's one of my favorite books. I worked really hard on it. There's a lot of clever stuff. All of this is my own work, completely my own. Once I had finished it, I have, of course, written a bot that writes like me. Hasn't everyone? And so I had the Liza Long persona bot write it. I have not told my teacher this, by the way. I turned in mine and I did not use AI for the course because I agreed I wouldn't, right? That's a learner. It's fine. I know enough about queer theory to read it, and I don't think my teacher would have caught me, to be honest. You can read it and see if you think he would have, but I don't think my teacher would have caught this. Like, I really don't. It's not about my teacher, Jonathan. That's back to your question. It's not about my teacher. It's about me as a learner. I loved the struggle. It made me so glad I was back in graduate school. I love being in school. I love thinking about those big ideas. Why would I cheat? He's right. Why would I cheat? So that's the kind of love we need to instill in our students. And it's even harder when they're in our first year writing courses and they don't care. They just want to be a nurse or whatever, right? So why would they cheat? Let's not let them cheat. On the other hand, My second professor she was frankly AI curious, and I'm actually hoping she'll be on my dissertation committee because she was really, really great to work with. She was like, I imagine there might be some places where using AI would be useful for you as a learner. I don't know what those are because I don't use it. Just check in with me. So I did at the end. We had a lot of conversations throughout the class, and I was playing around with Notebook LM. I showed her what I wanted to do. She was fine with it. I love Notebook LM, by the way. That's a whole other presentation. But so I said, okay, I'm going to send you two versions of my paper. You can grade whichever one you want. This is the one that was not written with any AI. And again, you can compare these later on your own time, right? And then this is a version with AI. And like I used Claude pretty extensively to help me with some writing problems that I know I have. Like I'm really tangential. Surprise, surprise, right? And it was great. It really helped me to tighten my argument. It completely straight up made up some quotes from bell hooks, which was weird, with page numbers. But it was like really good at helping guide me in the same way that it's good at helping guide my students. So I feel like that was an ethical use, and she was really intrigued by seeing both of those. But as a final takeaway, one thing that I'm telling my students, this is a picture. I got to go to the OpenAI Educator Forum, and I couldn't, the whole time I was trying to listen to Ethan Mollick, and I couldn't remember if I'd unplugged my curling iron or not. I don't know if that's relatable to anyone, but I was like freaking out. So as soon as I got back to the hotel, I was like, oh, look, I did unplug it. I took a picture. And I tell that story in my story of the OpenAI interaction because you know what? That's superhuman. AI is not going to make up that anecdote, right? And it's being that human in the loop, I think, is like a really important part of the process. And again, Peter Elbow bringing back expressivism. I think we might have a chance at that. We might be able to bring back expressivism. So as a student, yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I wanted that friction. I wanted it, and I'm glad that I gave myself that chance to learn. But I also really personally like being able to write a paper and then get instant feedback on it, right? Which I would do with peers, but now I have this extra peer. So I'm going to close up, and then there's a couple of slides with resources you can take, but I'm going to just close up with some advice that I have. First, partner with AI to rethink your writing assessments. I'm doing that with my English 215 course right now, and I'm changing up all my discussion boards. Find a few trusted people to follow: Ethan Mollick, Sarah Eaton, Lance Eaton, Mark Watkins, Anna Mills is fantastic, Laura Duman, Reed Hepler from CSI, love his stuff for information literacy. I mean, there's so many great people, right? If you feel free to reach out to me if you want some people to follow, or check my Substack and see who I'm following. There's some really great people, but you don't have to know it all, right? So just focusing on what you need to know, what's going to benefit you right now, I think is important. Consider learning something new. I took a Python course for the first time because I've never coded, and I was having Claude write code for me. I wanted to know what was going on, and now I do. It was great. It was great to experience as a learner. Then you'll know how your students are experiencing writing, and then build those learning communities and keep that privacy and consent top of mind. So okay, I jammed through a lot of stuff. All of this, if you have resources you want to share, please do. But this really is a conclusion. Of the presentation. These are a lot of the things I've talked about, links to my textbooks and other things we put together, and then contact information for me. So, whew, I think I was 1 minute over. Sorry, guys. Thank you so much for being here.